Hello, cruel world. What are the signs that your child might be being groomed by a sexual predator? What is the biggest child sexual grooming scandal of all time in the UK? And what factors contributed to it? This episode is kind of like a sequel on my previous video on grooming. And in that video, I did a psychoanalysis of abuse allegations against Marilyn Manson. My name is the ominous Shahominous Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. So if you like your true crime with a twist of psychiatry, then this channel is for you. Let's get started. So firstly, I'm going to cover what are the signs of grooming that you need to spot to protect your loved ones. Some of them are obvious, some of them less so. So let's go through some of those signs. Firstly, your child might get some unexpected gifts, like new toys, for example, or clothes, but they actually seem quite reluctant to talk about the origin of those gifts or where they're coming from. Another sign might be that they're getting lots of messages from somebody that they know online. If it's an older child, then it might be an adult that they want to spend more time with, but their reasons or their explanations are a bit shady, they're a bit reluctant, and everything's all a bit kind of secretive. Another sign might be that they're spending a lot more time in their room, although that's not to be confused with goths. You can tell the difference between that and a goth by the level of makeup. Another sign might be that your child is missing school or skipping school or missing out in other social or sporting activities. A huge sign is not wanting other people to be around when they're with a particular person. So it might be a new friend or a new boyfriend or girlfriend. So those are the things that are actually quite obvious. A lot of that is common sense. Later on in the episode, I'm going to talk about the less obvious, the more subtle kind of signs, including how people who groom actually act towards the parents rather than the children. And they tend to be a lot more kind of clandestine and sneaky. So in a previous video, I talked about what grooming involves, and I talked about how groomers get confidence in the victims and in their parents. And I also talked specifically about the abuse allegations against Marilyn Manson. And I also talked about what happened to Wales's most prolific paedophile, a man named John Styler, who I've kind of got, I had some personal involvement in his case, even though it was many years after he died, in that I assessed a number of his victims to help them with their civil court cases, their claims against the council and the school for not protecting them. Let's keep it moving because I ain't got no time for shucking and jiving. I'm about to talk about the biggest child protection scandal in the history of the UK. So I'm going to put on my serious face and turn down my joke meter because this isn't funny. So obviously, if you know anything about UK's kind of crime history, you will know that I'm about to talk about the Rotherham Scandal. So this is about organised sexual exploitation in a town called Rotherham, which is in South Yorkshire in the north of England. So the abuse is said to have occurred from the late 1980s all the way to the 2010s, and it was at least connected to failure of the local authorities to act on reports. And there's some evidence that the abuse was first noted in the early 1990s. And it's basically these care home managers were reporting that a number of their children were being picked up from these care homes, these young vulnerable girls, and taken away by taxi drivers. And then years later, the Times, the newspaper, reported a cover-up. So for my American viewers, you might not have heard of the Times. It's kind of a well-respected newspaper in the UK. Think of Fox News, and then think of the exact opposite of that, and then you've got the Times. So the Times said that in 2012, the abuse in the town was widespread, and the police and the council had known about it for over 10 years. I mean, this is mind-blowing. It's just really shocking when I first heard about it, and also when I've reread the details. It's not a good look for everybody involved, especially the people who are held responsible, like the council. So what did they find out? They found out that from at least 2001, there were multiple reports, and they actually had the name of alleged perpetrators, including several from one particular family. And these names were reported to the council and to the police. And the first group conviction didn't take place until 2010, and 5 British Pakistani men were convicted of sexual offences against girls who were aged 12 to 16. So it's just absolutely just diabolically shocking stuff. And it was investigated in Parliament, and the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee and Rotherham Council both commissioned independent reports, and they estimated in their conclusions that 1,400 children, 1,400 had been sexually abused in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013, predominantly by British Pakistani men. So what did the actual abuse involve? What did the perpetrators do? Before I answer that question, let me formally introduce you to this channel. My name is Dr. 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 𝐅𝐨𝐫 I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders in courts and in prisons and in psychiatric units, and I give formal evidence as an expert witness psychiatrist in criminal courts, but you can call me the ominous 𝐿. This channel is like a cross-section between true crime and mental illness, and I dissect a whole range of topics. So if you're interested, I've got previous videos about gangs and how that all relates to mental health and mental illness and offending. I've done a breakdown of Catherine Knight, who's the first Australian woman to get life imprisonment, like a full-term life imprisonment, as in she'll never be released from prison because she murdered, decapitated her husband, tried to cook his head. I've got another video on the case of John Wayne Bobbitt, I'm sure you've heard of that. I've got another video about the psychology of pathological lying, the psychology of stalking. There's loads of stuff, and if you're a fan of true crime and you like it with a twist of psychiatry, then this channel is for you. And I implore you to subscribe, because not only does it help me out immeasurably, but actually improves the chat of your Uber drivers from now on in every single Uber you take. Guaranteed all your money back. Okay, let's get back to the episode. So what did the perpetrators do in the Rotherham case? Trigger warning, what I'm about to say, it's about to get nasty, although it's probably a little bit too late to give you this warning. You're probably too committed. It's probably too late to pull out, reminiscent of how you were conceived. Okay, so their MO, these perpetrators, these taxi drivers have been picking children up from school and from their care homes, and then their abuse was in the form of gang rapes, and they're forcing the children to watch rapes, and they even doused them in petrol and threatened to set them on fire just to really kind of intimidate them and scare them. And they also threatened to rape their mothers and their younger sisters if they told anybody about what was going on. And they even trafficked them into other towns so that other kind of perpetrators in their circle could abuse them. And unsurprisingly, there was pregnancies. There was even a pregnancy of a girl aged 12, and this led to miscarriages, terminations, absolutely horrific, atrocious stuff. I mean, you know, like I talk about some dark things on this channel, but this just, I don't even know, I can't even put it into words. It's just mind blowing. It is that sort of dark. But it begs the question, if the authorities knew about this, why didn't they stop it? And the failure of the authorities has been attributed to a number of factors involving race, class, and also gender. It was felt that there was like this contemptuous and sexist attitude towards the victims, mostly who were working class, poor, white women, white girls, not even women. And there was a lack of a child-centered focus, and there was this desire to protect the town's reputation. And also there was a lack of training and resources to the council and to the police. This is what the investigations have found. But I do not think it can be overstated that one of the really relevant factors was this fear by the police of appearing racist. So amazingly, their fear of looking that they're going to be accusing Pakistani British men who were the perpetrators, that seemed to be sort of more important, that seemed to overpower protecting the victims. And I don't really know what to say to that, to be honest. I don't know how one person can justify that way of thinking, let alone an entire police force. So what were the consequences of all of this? So Rotherham's council chief executive and also the director of children's services for Police and Crime Commission for South Yorkshire, they all decided for their inquiry that the Rotherham Council was not fit for purpose, which is a polite way of saying it sucked balls. So in February 2015, the government replaced the council's elected officials, but most importantly, even more importantly than that, 19 men and amazingly 2 women were convicted in 2016, 2017 for sexual offences, and one of the ringleaders was jailed for 35 years. May they all rot in hell. Okay, let's keep it moving. I'm going to switch topics back to talk about signs of grooming in terms of behaviour towards the parents. So as I said, this is probably a bit more overt, a bit less obvious than the grooming signs. Before I just go on to that, I just really want to explain why I'm making this channel. I want to give you my professional insights. I want to educate you because you're worth it. And I would say that there are a lot of true crime YouTube channels out there, but there's none apart from mine that gives you an insight into working like how a forensic psychiatrist would. So I want you to start dissecting and analysing cases like a professional, both from a psychiatric perspective and also from a legal perspective. So I want you to start thinking like me, talking like me, even smelling like me. And if you're willing to brown up a little bit, possibly even looking like me. Okay, so in terms of behaviours of the groomer towards the parents, the perpetrator might offer to take the child to like a sporting activity or camping or babysitting. So they're just trying to spend a lot of time alone with that particular child. And a huge, but maybe not obvious telltale sign is that they try and play innocently with the child in a non-sexual way while you're around, you know, such as wrestling and cuddling. And this is so the child gets used to physical contact. So as I mentioned before, my previous episode, The Psychology of Grooming, and I talked about John Styler, who's this headmaster. He was very charming, he's very well respected and very liked in the community in Wales. But unbeknownst to all these parents, he was abusing all these children, and that's exactly what he did. He sort of ingratiated himself with the victims' parents and the whole of the community. So they might also buy gifts for the family, they might flood you with compliments about your parenting in general, so they just kind of make you feel good. And also they might start offering to do things for your family just so that you're used to having them around and to let your guard down so you're not suspicious of them, like repairing things for you or gardening, just trying to ingratiate yourselves. So obviously, I'm not saying that if anybody's nice to you, they're automatically a sexual predator. They could also be a terrorist. So to conclude, what did we learn in this episode? We learned that grooming behavior towards children and parents is different. Sometimes it can be obvious, sometimes it can be a bit subtle. We learned that you cannot trust your friendly neighbours. We learned about the atrocious, diabolical case of the Rotherham child sex scandal. And we learned about the systemic problems that allowed this to happen, allowed it to continue, allowed it to be swept underneath the carpet. So as I keep banging on about, I've got a book that came out on the 10th of March called Into Mind. It's a bit like this channel, but it's more of a deep dive. It talks about a lot of my more individual cases. I actually talk about John Styler briefly in that, but a lot more of the cases that are related to mental illness. So if you're interested in that, you have to do it. You should buy this book, not only because it educates you, but also because it makes me money. And if you can't read, I've got good news. It's also going to be an Audible and an audio version, which I read out my very self. I implore you to tell people about this channel. I need more subs. I've got a very weak ego and very shallow, so I need more love. Please tell everybody about it. Also, I'm going to be at CrimeCon UK in June of this year in London. I'm going to be sitting on a number of panels discussing lots of high-profile cases, etc., etc. I hope to see you there. Until next time, stay euthymic, and please do not forget, I love you.